Hey everyone, this is Mike of Music Jotter, and I decided that a good portion of my videos will be in the form of music tutorials. But my tutorials will be more on the practical side, and I figured that I can use Music Jotter in these tutorials as a way to demonstrate the capabilities of what this software is able to do. I'll see if this style works, but if so, this format will give you a sense of the benefits of this software and how it can help you out as a composer, but in a fun and interactive way. And you also get to learn a few things along the way. So this tutorial is going to touch on the basics of tuplets, because the rhythm is the basic foundation of music. And Music Jotter has implemented an excellent tuplet system, making it extremely easy and fun to use. But a lot of you may be confused on what a tuplet is and when should you even use them. So I'm going to just go over a little bit why a composer would use a triplet if you can just use, just change the time signature. A good example of a composer using tuplets throughout his entire piece is Chopin's Fantasie Impromptu. So this is a perfect example because this composer used triplets in his left hand throughout his entire piece. And even in the middle section, he uses tuplets in the right hand going up against tuplets in the left hand. So why would a composer even bother doing something like that? Why not just write the Fantasie Impromptu in 4/4 time and just use the regular eighth notes in the left hand? So I'm going to actually answer these questions towards the end of this video. So after this, you'll get a better feel for the basic tuplet and why composers tend to use them. But I can't go over tuplets just yet in detail because you first have to have a good understanding of what a note duration is and how to calculate note durations. So the duration of a note will designate how long that note is played. And in music, we base everything off of the whole note, and we just keep dividing it by 2 in order to get our standard note durations. So I'm going to show real quick the standard note durations in Music Jotter, where they are in Music Jotter. And this note toolbar here is where all of our note durations and rests will be located. Right here. So you can see our whole note starts here. And if you keep dividing it in half, that's how you get the rest of the note durations. So we get a whole, half, a quarter, an eighth, 16th, 32nd, 64th, and 128th. Now you can start to see how stringent these values are. So for example, we don't have a third note. We don't have a fifth note. We can't do a seventh note or a 7th, 16th note. So the reason why it's very stringent is just so it's easy to read and easy to measure the beats and to measure the rhythms. So, but if a composer wants to change the rhythm up a little bit, this is where we start getting into tuplet territory. Every time signature is going to have a whole set of durations set to its note. And you can calculate the number of beats to a note just by analyzing the time signature. So real quick, very basic. I'm just going to go over 4/4 time. So if we're in 4/4 time, then we could say that the numerator here is basically the number of beats for that measure. So we have 4 beats that will create this entire measure. Whoa, that does not look like an S. And the denominator will denote the rhythm, in this case, the quarter note. So here's, this will be the quarter note here, goes 1/4. So we can also say this time signature will consist of basically four quarter notes that will fit into this measure. And when you compose with Music Jotter, it will make sure that you can't add any more than 4 quarter notes into that measure. Now, this is standard for basically every notation software on the market, but I'm trying to make the point that in non-meterless music, you won't be able to add any more notes into this measure. Now, of course, if you change it to meterless mode, then you can start adding more notes into this measure. But that'll be another video, another time. So that's how we calculate note duration. So in this case, we have 1 beat for every quarter note. And from there, we can now calculate the rest of the beats. We know that for the half note, it would just be twice the amount. So we're going to also write it down. For our quarter note, we have 1 beat. Our half note is going to be twice that, so 2 beats. And our eighth note will be half a beat. And I'll just go up to 16. You get the picture. This will be 0.25, or a quarter of a beat. So in 4/4 time, this is our duration values. These are our duration values for the notes. And you can see how stringent they are. Like, we don't have a third. Where's the 30.333 note? Where's the third note? Or where's the fifth note? If we stick with non-tuplet values, we're stuck with just these note durations for this time signature. Okay, so very basic. It seems pretty obvious, but I think I have to go over something like that before I explain what a tuplet is, because Music Jotter's tuplet system is pretty advanced. So in order to fully appreciate the tuplet system that we have for you, you do have to understand how to calculate the basic note durations. So let's test it now in practice. So we have 1 beat per quarter note, and we know that we can fit 4 quarter notes in a measure. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now for the eighth note, it's going to be just basically double the amount of notes, because we have half a beat that will fill up into this measure. So 0.5 times 4, so 0.5 times 8 will give you 4 beats. 0.51, 1.52, 2.53, 3.54. And then basically just keep multiplying by 2 in order to get the rest of the note duration values. Now, the cool thing about Music Jotter is that you can also put rests in between other notes. So that's something that I think is pretty cool. In between those notes here. First, let's just make the measure wider. And then we can go to our eighth note here and our eighth rest here and place it right here. So, or if we want to put it here, we can do it like that. So that's pretty cool. I think that's a nice feature. We can do the same with notes as well. So you can place notes in between other notes. That's just an aside since I'm showing you the product. Now we'll do one more time signature. Let's do 3/4. And let's calculate the beats for 3/4. So first, let me update the time signature by going on the Edit tab. So click on Edit, Key and Time Signature. I'll just click 3/4 over here, click OK. And I'm going to just put in a couple of notes here. Okay, we can see right off the bat I can't add any more than 3 quarter notes. And that's simply because the time signature states that we cannot fit any more than 3 quarter notes into this one measure, because the numerator says 3, the denominator says 4. So we have 3 quarter notes that could fit into this measure. Or we have another way of saying this is we have 3 beats that consists of quarter notes in this measure. Okay, so now that we know that the quarter note is equal to one beat, just like in 4/4 time, it was also equal to 1 beat. The rest of the durations we can calculate, which is exactly the same as 4/4 time. The only difference is the measure now consists of 3 beats instead of 4 beats. So it's pretty easy to calculate the duration. Once you understand common time, you can pretty easily calculate your durations moving forward. So now let's get into the tuplet, right? Because now I told you that the durations are based off of halves in this case, like 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 16, 32. But what happens if I want a third? That's what a triplet would be. So in Music Jotter, you can explicitly define a triplet by clicking on this note tab here. And you can click on this tuplet ratio dialog. And you can define it here. Or you can even make a shortcut over here if you want. We'll talk about shortcuts later, but you can put in a whole bunch of shortcuts for your tuplets. And then you can easily access them in the ribbon menu. Or you can explicitly define your tuplet ratio over here. So let's say I'm going to go back to 4/4 time first. Okay. So I'm going to make a reference point first. In the right hand, I'm going to just put 4 quarter notes. Okay, so let's say I want 3 eighth notes per 2 quarter notes. Okay, so let's say for these 2 quarter notes, the duration of these 2 quarter notes, let's say I want 3 eighth notes here. So you can't do that in normal duration. So that's why we need the tuplet. So I'm going to go to the tuplet ratio dialog box up here. And I said 3 eighth notes for every 2 quarter notes in this case. That's my definition. So let's start composing. 1, 2, 3. Here we go. I'm going to keep going. 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. So look at that. I don't even have to, it's already aligned. We've got our 3 eighth notes in the place of 2. It's very clear on what you're doing. The dialog box is very clear. It makes it very clear on what you need to do. Okay, so now let's say we want to have 7 quarter notes in the place of this triplet, basically. So this triplet here, let's say we want to have 7 quarter notes in the place of this triplet here. So we have to look at it in normal note duration first. So in the left hand, we can fit 4 quarter notes, right? So let's do that. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So another way of doing this is to say, I want 7 quarter notes in the place of 2 quarter notes. Because in this case, we have to use that ratio against the normal durations. So let's go to our tuplet ratio and say we have 7 quarter notes for every 2 quarter notes. And this will give us exactly what we're looking for. Cool. Yeah, so Chopin actually used this technique in his Fantasie Impromptu in the middle section, where I think he had a 7 tuplet going against a 3 tuplet. So this is something that you can do in Music Jotter because Music Jotter offers complete freedom over your tuplet placement. You can even beam the tuplets together because I know Chopin used sextuplets. So in this case, I'm using triplets here. Just hover over a note, press space, and you can beam them together to create that sextuplet. So Chopin used that technique in order to create that pretty smooth feeling when you're playing, that fantasy feeling when playing that piece. So you can definitely do that in Music Jotter. And just as a refresher, again, so what a tuplet is, basically, we're changing the rules of the note duration. So again, if we want a 1/3 note, that's how we do it. We use a tuplet, we define it. The closest you can get to maybe abnormal durations is by using dotted notes, but that can get very sloppy and your score will look kind of messy. So we want to avoid using too many dotted notes in that case. How do we figure out the tempo of a piece? Because the time signature doesn't give us any tempo instructions. So a beat could be 1 beat per second. It could be 1 beat for every 2 seconds or half a second. We don't have those instructions yet. So this is where BPM comes in. This is beats per minute. That will give us a basic understanding of how fast a piece should be played. So if you're counting at a rate of 1 beat for every second, well, that would be 60 BPM, 60 beats per minute. And that is roughly the walking speed, I think, is andante. So composers use phrases to designate BPM or to designate tempo. And that's because tempo is not an exact science. Like, we're not going to be calculating exactly how many seconds we're playing each note, but we're getting a feel for it. And you get a better feel for it using phrases. And the composer knows that performers won't be that exact. So that's why they use usually Italian phrases that will indicate the different speeds. So I'm going to publish a list of common phrases and the corresponding BPM on this video, so you can take a look at that. So again, if you're counting at a rate of 1 second, 1 beat per 1 second, that's 60 BPM. It's going to be something like at a rate like this, something like that. And then at 120 BPM, which would be double that, and that's going to be at allegro, or I don't know if I got my words right, but it'll be quicker. And you would research which keyword would indicate the correct BPM when writing your music. So that's how you would determine how fast you play a piece. So the time signature alone doesn't give you how fast to play the music. It just gives you the correct beats for each duration, for each note. And it assigns it to a note duration. But the BPM will actually give you the information you need on how fast you're playing that piece. But if your tempo is, let's say, at 70 BPM, which is walking speed, you don't want to stick exactly at 70 BPM. Otherwise, it won't sound like it's human performed. But of course, that also depends on the style. So because some Baroque pieces and some classical pieces should adhere to strict tempo. But if you are in, let's say, the Romantic period or beyond, you may want to vary the tempo, and that's called rubato. So in that case, we would have it fluctuate between, let's say, 65 and 85 throughout the piece. And Music Jotter will actually do this for you to fix some of these problems associated with playback. So I'm also going to focus on strong and weak beats associated with the time signatures, which I'll go over in future videos. But the bottom line is that if you want your piece to sound more human, then the tempo should never be set to a strict BPM. So we do want to emulate imperfections in playback to create that human feel. And some of this also has to do with microtones and tunings, but that's going to be for another time. So I'm not going to go over that now. But before I go, I want to give you my opinion on why I feel Chopin used tuplets in his Fantasie Impromptu. So his left hand is basically filled with sextuplets, and this sets the rhythm of his piece. So I'm going to compose just the rhythms of his piece in Music Jotter. Let me reset the layout. So I'm going to right click, undo score formatting. Make sure we're in 4/4 time because that's what Chopin used in his Fantasie Impromptu. And in the right hand, it's filled with 16th notes. So this is the rhythm of his right hand. So I'm going to refresh. I'm going to refresh this. So now the left hand is going to be sextuplets. So I'm going to go to Notes. I'm going to click on Tuplet Ratio. And we're going to do a 6 notes to 4 note ratio in this case. And let's start composing. So this is the rhythm that Chopin set. And these first 4 notes going upwards, these actually would go down again. So these first 4 notes here would set the harmony of the piece. But the six notes, basically 6 eighth notes to 16, 6 eighth notes to 8 16th notes, that sets the rhythm of the piece. And it's my opinion on why he did this is so that it felt like a smooth, so when you're playing it, it would sound very soft and smooth. So equivalent to when you're in art and you see and if something's not anti-aliased, it's very jagged. Well, it is my opinion that in this case he wanted to create that same sensation, but musically instead. So this rhythm with 8 16th notes against 6 8th notes sets that soft tone, that soft sensation, that fantasy feel. That's what he was looking for. He was looking to compose a fantasy type music. And I believe that this was not really a piece that he liked. I don't think he expected it to be published, but it ended up being one of his greatest works in my opinion. It's a very fun work. I think he created it when he was a little bit on his older side. So older for him would have been like in his mid-30s because he didn't live that long. So, but for that time, I think he was in his mid-30s when he composed this piece. But correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. So we know Chopin used tuplets throughout his piece, Fantasie Impromptu. And again, I think that it has something to do with the piece sounding, it would sound too jarring if it was just using 8th notes. So this texture was able to be created by using the tuplet in this case. So we changed the rules of the note duration by using a tuplet throughout his whole entire piece. If he had used regular 8th notes, I think it might sound a little strange. Just normal 8th notes against, so 8 8th notes in the left hand rather than 12 8th notes in the left hand. I think it would sound a little strange. The texture would just sound a little different. And it might sound more like a scherzo than an impromptu or a Fantasie Impromptu. He's also trying to create that feeling of randomness. So these are some of the reasons why I feel he used the tuplet in this case. And he's used tuplets throughout a lot of his works, like his ballad, 1 in G minor. He used like an 18 tuplet against 3 notes, which toward the beginning of that work. So he uses them throughout his piano works, and it helps create a nice texture, in my opinion, very poetic. So in the future, I probably will have another video that links to this one. It'll go over tuplets a little more in depth. Nothing too crazy at this point, because you can do all kinds of crazy things with tuplets, but I'll probably just do nothing but here's how you do a 5 to 3 ratio, or if you want to fit 7 notes in the space of 4 notes or something like that. I'll probably just go over some scenarios that you may see in different compositions. And I'll probably maybe look at real world examples as well. Like I was explaining before, Chopin's ballad, he used an 18 to 3 tuplet ratio. And he uses them a lot in his piano concertos. There's other composers out there, such as Sorabji. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he has notation that's pretty crazy. So we can take a look at some of his scores too. They're pretty interesting. So if you want to see me do more of these videos, definitely hit that thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. This is a small little channel. I'm trying to spread the word of Music Jotter. I decided to become a part-time YouTube content creator for this reason. And these videos do take a little bit of time. So I want to know if what I'm doing is of interest to you. And the only way to know that is if you tell me, basically. With that said, I want to say that my very first video actually did fairly well, especially since it was very unpolished. So I thank you for watching that. It really means a lot. And I'm probably going to create a part 2 of that video. So it's titled 24 minutes, Music Jotter in 24 minutes. But obviously there's a lot to this software. So I can probably do it in reality a couple hours. But I'll probably create another video that just goes over everything I've accomplished since I started the software, very high level. So it'll probably be a premiere. I'll set that one up as a premiere. This way I'll set a certain time, I'll promote it just like I did for the first video. And we'll see. So far, the reception of these videos have been pretty good. So I'll continue to do them, but we'll continue to see if I get, more likes, more subscriptions on YouTube. It's my first time doing this, so thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.